Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Never Seen It. My name is Trent. I'm sitting here, as always, with Betsy.
Hello, Trent.
It is the penultimate episode of this year's edition of our Oscar movies thing that we're doing every single year. Betsy, we're here to talk about the movie Train Dreams that came out this year from Netflix. Now, before it got nominated for Best Picture, I could not have told you what it was about, who's in it, or even that it was a movie. But what do you know about the movie?
So I had heard about this simply because it played at our local art house theater, so I knew it existed, but it wasn't really on a lot of lists to make it to the cut of 10 movies. It was like just on the outside looking in.
Like, I remember looking at some lists and seeing it on there, but there wasn't like a description of what the movie was, or even that it was a Netflix movie or what it was about. It was just one of the many, many movies on these huge lists.
And then, to use a train pun, it suddenly picked up steam and it made the final cut. As far as knowing anything about the movie, I was only slightly ahead of you. I knew it existed. I knew Joel Edgerton was the star. I had heard it has really beautiful cinematography.
Mm-hmm.
The only other person I definitively knew who was in it is Carrie Condon, because she is in this and she's in F1. So she'll be in the last two movies we are watching. She made it to 2 Best Picture nominees.
Spoilers, you know what we're doing next week because it's the last one.
Well, they could have figured that out, Trent.
Yeah.
I don't know, though, what it is. Are we building the railroads? He's out in the wilderness cutting down trees.
We watched a trailer after the nominations got put out, kind of all at the same time, and that was, more than a couple of weeks ago now. And I think one other person that I remember is featured in the trailer is Felicity Jones.
Yes, now that you say that,
yeah,
yes.
So, it's about this guy. He works on the railroad. Maybe he works at not a lumber company, but a company that fells trees and uses the wood from that to make the timbers in order to lay track.
Or they're just clearing the path at the same time make the track.
I don't know, yeah. But it is the experience of these people out in the woods, living amongst nature, and really being a part of, I think this is taking place in the early 1900s.
Give or take, just because we've seen some things that suggest he's at a movie, which means that might be later in the 1920s or something.
I don't know if there's a timeline that we're following here, if we're going into the future, if this is all during, a season, a year.
Memories of the
past. This guy's entire life. I really don't know. But as you said, it really looks to be one of these very artsy movies that has a lot of shots of trees and the outdoors, and is maybe just going to be a movie to look at and not necessarily have a whole lot of plot. But I don't know. I could be surprised here. So, Betsy, unless you had anything to talk about, I think we can probably go.
I really don't, Trent, because like I said, until we watched a trailer, I didn't really know anything what the movie was about. And even after watching the trailer, it doesn't give you a whole lot.
No, and I'm okay with that. This is an Oscar thing. They don't really want to tell you what the movie is, and sometimes we get surprised. So with that, we're going to go and watch Train Dreams on Netflix. We will be right back. And that was Train Dreams. Betsy, I say this kind of every year we do one of these Oscar things, but I'm really glad that the Academy sees fit to include what I would call a nice movie. But how are you feeling about this one?
I was kind of thinking the same thing, that this is the nice movie, because I really liked that. It's one of these simple movies where kind of nothing is happening. It's not like this guy was born to do something extraordinary. It's this quiet movie about a quiet man and his quiet life. And at the end of the film, I was kind of sobbing. I cried twice watching this movie because it's so fucking beautiful.
Yeah, Betsy, the kind of the tagline that I wrote down as encompassing my thoughts about the movie is a life, no matter how simple it is. The guy wants for nothing. He doesn't come from any big family. He doesn't even know when he was born. Like, think about that. Imagine not knowing your birthday and going through life not really knowing who you are, where you come from, and being disconnected from humanity just by happenstance. And you're right, this is a beautiful movie in every sense of the word, from how it is shot, from the nature, from the acting, from just the naturality, and I don't know what other word to say here other than that. But the story is so simple. The setting is such that it is kind of modern, but really not. Like, we have electricity by the end of the movie. We have somebody going to space by the end of the movie. But this man is not a part of it. He's just standing by.
It's the kind of story you really don't get anymore because it's set at a time in the early 1900s where you could just exist out in the wilderness
Yeah.
and live an entire life and not ride in a car and not watch TV and not have a telephone. And you just are. And at the end of the movie, when he dies, they just have that shot of him in his cabin and it has been taken over by nature. It's like he was born from nature and then the world just takes him back at the end of it.
Yeah, and the thing that woman says when they're having their conversation in the tower, you know, a dead tree is just as important to nature as an alive one.
Or a hermit is just as important as a preacher on a pulpit.
Yeah, exactly. The quote there is, the world needs a hermit out in the wilderness just like it needs a preacher at the pulpit.
Every life has meaning. Every life is important, even if you feel like there's no point to your life.
And everything is connected. And I know that really sounds like something that a hippie would say, like, yeah, you got to get connected to nature, man.
Touch some grass.
But this guy really lived it. And the other thing that I wrote down about him is just, he is a good man. By every sense of the word, he feels guilty about this one thing and it haunts him the rest of his life. He didn't do anything to him. It's just that, oh no, I see injustice in the world and it's happening right in front of me, but I didn't do anything to protect the innocent person from being victimized.
It's not that he didn't do anything, it's that he didn't do enough. He did
Yeah,
try.
right.
He did try to intervene and he kept saying, what did he do? What did he do? I don't understand.
Right.
And he regrets this and is haunted by it forever. He also, when he gets home and there's a fire and there's no trace of his wife and daughter, he lives with that regret because he doesn't know what happened to them. You can assume they died in the fire.
Mm-hmm.
You could just as well assume they went somewhere else to safety, and this is just a time where you cannot get in touch with people. People disappeared all the time in the early 1900s.
They could, because nobody is really monitoring you.
You don't have a phone. You don't get mail. You're out in the fucking wilderness.
They could have just as easily got lost after they're running away from the fire.
You don't have any more family. If you don't have a reason to come back, why would you? So after so many years, you assume they were in the fire.
But he still has it in the back of his mind that I need to be here just in case they find their way home.
And Trent, this is something that I was thinking about watching this. There's something really romantic about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about things like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre and these old English novels where tragedy befalls these people or they're running away from something and they just aimlessly wander the moors. That's what this felt like. This guy is just aimlessly wandering the woods, trying to find the thing he lost. He even says he doesn't even know what he's waiting for.
And you say the word romantic, and that could mean a couple of different things. The narrator telling the story about how they met, like, he's not looking to hook up with anybody. He just happens to be in the area. He walks by somebody, and the woman approaches him.
It's chance.
And they have this wonderful, wonderful relationship together where it's kind of modern in that Yes, she is the stay-at-home mother raising the kids and taking care of the homestead, but she also has ideas where, hey, we finally have enough money. Let's build a farm. Let's build a sawmill. Let's actually participate in this economy and be a part of things rather than just be outside by ourselves all the time.
And then you could be home and we can be together.
Exactly. Because he says, I feel like I'm missing out on everything. Like, I want to be here for my daughter, but I have to go off and earn money and send it home so that we can actually live out here. But the other sense of the word romance is exactly that. Being out in the wilderness where you could uproot your life, move to the city, use whatever money you have to go live in a quote unquote city. But they reveal at the beginning of the movie the farthest east he ever goes is a place in Montana. This guy knows nothing but the wilderness. Betsy, at a couple of different moments here, I was reminded of the movie The Shawshank Redemption.
I was waiting to bring this up because I thought of exactly the same thing.
Oh my God. Yeah. The character in that movie who has been institutionalized most of his life,
Brooks.
He gets released from prison and goes off and enters a world that he does not know.
The world went and got itself in a big damn
rush.
hurry.
Big damn rush.
Big damn rush. Okay.
So the parallels there are really striking. And it's not that he's in prison. He's choosing to be out in the wilderness with his family, but everything is just passing him by to the point where the thing that he knows, which is logging, he sees these other old guys telling stories about the old days, and he notices when they can't really help out in the same way that they used to be able to do. Well, it happens to him. They get these gas-powered chainsaws that basically make his life, or his job anyway, obsolete. They don't need an old guy like this anymore because the world has passed him by.
And the thing that triggers it is the other old timer doesn't even remember his friend who he was so close with. And he's just like, I don't want to be that. He just has this epiphany one day. My job, my time as a logger is done. And he goes back.
And I think because he is observant of the other people on the crew, he remembers the faces, he remembers the names, and he doesn't want to end up like this guy. He doesn't want to end up like the William H. Macy character who gets hit in the noggin and he loses all of his memories and dies a few days later. He doesn't want to end up like that. He doesn't want to end up like this guy who doesn't remember him. He doesn't remember his friend who is actually memorable.
I think he also doesn't want to forget his wife and daughter because this is after they're gone. He doesn't know what happened to them exactly.
Right.
But he goes back to logging and then he's like, I'm done now. And the rest of the movie, he stays on his little homestead and waits. And like I said, he doesn't know what he's waiting for, but he just knows he feels compelled to be in this spot.
And by chance, he has an opportunity to buy this carriage and these horses and is able to build a life for himself by himself. And I think, Betsy, the most beautiful interaction that he has isn't necessarily with his wife or his daughter, but it's with him and the Carrie Condon character, where they're up on that tower and he finally allows himself to talk about what happened to his wife and kid. And in reality, he doesn't really talk to a whole lot of people. The most he interacts with anybody is with his wife, obviously, but he pretty much keeps to himself. I think it's just the connection that he has with this woman who is not like any other woman he's ever met before. The Carrie Condon character is very confident and very, I don't know what else to say.
Modern.
Modern, yeah, that's a great word. But in this moment here, he reveals, I wasn't here for when the fire happened, but my wife and my daughter were. And he starts talking about, sometimes I hear them and I don't dare look over my shoulder to see if it's them because I might scare them off. Like, he's putting all of this on himself. And I don't know whether or not that's just a lack of forgiveness for not being there or really lamenting the fact that he had to go off and work like he did because he didn't know anything else. This is just where the jobs are. This is the thing that he can do.
They're really good at painting it where he was working a lot, but he was gone from his family. So he decides to stay closer to home. But money is so tight and work is so scarce, he finally bites the bullet and decides, we're going to do one more season. I'll do one last job, Trent.
Yeah.
Where have you heard this before? He goes off, and it's that moment where the fire happens. So even though he had been at home and happiness was within his grasp,
and he has this plan that
They have a plan.
they're gonna have this life together. We're gonna be together, and we're gonna have money.
but because he needs that extra money to get them over the finish line, that's what causes him to not be there. And he is immediately full of regret when he gets back because he's like, why wasn't I here? I had been here. I left. I shouldn't have left. And it haunts him. That's the other thing about this guy. He's haunted by so many things.
Yeah.
This entire movie, he sees visions of that guy who he watched get thrown off a bridge. Why? Because he was Asian. That's all. He was an Asian guy. And the other people who were building that bridge didn't like him, and they threw him off the bridge. There's no explanation that makes sense other than that. But because he feels like he didn't do enough, he sees this guy half of the movie. He dreams about him. He dreams about his wife and daughter. He dreams about the fire. He dreams about himself as a child. He just has all these mysterious thoughts that he's dealing with.
Speaking of him as a child, he says that his earliest memory is of when he witnessed mass deportation of Chinese immigrants. And as a child, you know right from wrong. You know that the violence that was put upon these people who were doing nothing to the people around them. As a child, he knew that what was happening in front of him was wrong. And he knows what happened to that guy who got thrown off a bridge is wrong. Whether he was given an explanation as to why it happened, he knows that what happened to him was wrong. So I think it's really just the innocence of this man who's known nothing but just doing what you can to get by. And he knows that the guy who was killed was also doing the same thing. The narrator here is talking about when you go on these jobs, you kind of create your own little mini families away from home. You have these connections with these people, whether you actually talk to them or not.
He says, I worked with this guy for 2 months and he never said a word.
Yeah. So it's just these little vignettes that he's telling the story of, or the narrator's telling the story of what happens during his life. All these different characters that enter and exit his life from season to season, from year to year. And again, it goes back to the idea that he has such a simple life, but he's still living his life. But really, Betsy, I want to talk about Joel Edgerton, but we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor first. We're going to be right back. This season, give yourself the gift you've always wanted. It's not a new car, and certainly not diamond jewelry. It's premium podcasts from the industry's leading connoisseurs of conversation. For only $5 a month, you will receive the most privileged access to their entire catalog. Patreon.com/NeverSeenItPod. Only the best for the discerning listener. So as we were watching the movie, I was racking my brain to try to think of any Joel Edgerton movies I had ever seen, and I could only come up with, I guess, 2. He's in 2 of the Star Wars prequel movies as the young Owen Lars. But besides those, I've never seen the man act. I'm sure you have, though.
I know I have, but off the top of my head, I don't know what I had seen him in.
I was scrolling through. He was apparently in that Great Gatsby movie.
Okay, then I've definitely seen that.
That's the one for sure that I know you've seen besides me. Apparently, he was also in Zero Dark 30. I did not remember him in that one.
I definitely saw that one too.
Yep. But again, I've been scrolling through here, and I don't think I've seen any of his other movies.
He's one of those really reliable actors that shows up in many things, but doesn't often get to be a star.
No, and I'll tell you this, Betsy. I don't know who I would take off the list, but I would say that is an Oscar-worthy performance.
There were a lot of people thinking he would make it in.
Yeah.
But I think there's just so many really great male lead performances that he was just on the outside, which is devastating because this is just a great performance. It's so good when he taps into those few moments of I'm going to actually feel the thing I'm feeling,
Yeah.
as opposed to just burying it inside. When he admits out loud, they're not coming back. He's out with
Yeah.
that guy. He's been sleeping on the ground. He's waiting for his wife and daughter. He doesn't know what else to do. And he just accepts that it's over. And he started crying, and I started crying.
Yeah, it's that moment and the moment up on the tower where he finally talks about it. Like, he doesn't really talk about it with his friend because he apologizes for emoting, for having any kind of emotion relating to the tragedy that happened to him. But every other time he kind of keeps to himself. He's going to his job every day. The little interaction that he has with the Carrie Condon character when he picks her up, I feel like there he's like excited to go and see her because he sees something in here that he can relate to. Like she's another hermit like he is.
And we find out her husband died. So these
Right.
two are both dealing with their own special grief in their own way. And they're dealing with it kind of similarly. They're out in the wilderness by themselves voluntarily. They don't have to be here.
Yeah.
She could have not come here, but she wanted to. But him, it's just what he knows, and he just never leaves it.
Yeah, and I want to point something out here that has nothing to do with movies at all. There is a video game that I know you've seen me play before.
Yep, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is a game called Firewatch, and it is a first-person perspective kind of a game that begins with a backstory of your character. You're a guy whose wife dies tragically through, I think, a sickness, and he takes this job as a forestry person. He goes up into this tower, and his job is to look for fire. He's a spotter, essentially. And kind of the whole point of the game is you talking with your quote unquote supervisor over the radio. You never see this person. You are by yourself and you don't really interact with anybody except for your supervisor on the radio. And there's not really much that you do. It is just this dialogue going back and forth. And finally, this relationship kind of blossoms between you two. And I don't really think it is like a romantic thing because you've never actually met each other, but there is a connection there. You actually start talking about what happens and you can go about it in a lot of different ways. I've played it a couple of times. It ends up in the same place at the end, but how you approach it changes depending on what choices that you make. But it's the same thing. Who in their right mind, and I emphasize right mind, who in their right mind would want to go off and be in this tower for months at a time by yourself?
She even says something to that effect when he says, everyone thinks I'm a little bit odd or a little bit crazy or something.
Mm-hmm.
She responds saying, I think everybody is like that sometimes. And I think that's her addressing her own feelings.
Right. She says, or she tells the story about how she got the job in the first place, where the Forestry Service has to interview one of your close friends. And I can't remember exactly what she says that the friend said about her, but essentially they said, well, she's not afraid of anything and she would be perfect for the job.
She's not like other girls.
Yeah.
In effect.
Yeah, that was the thing. It was something about, I know she's a woman, but she's not like a dainty feminine woman.
She lacks the timidity of other women.
Yeah, that's the line. I like that a lot. But I'm really just glad that a movie like this exists that has that same kind of not longing, but just I'm okay with being by myself, being out in the woods. And he even says it towards the end of the movie. Well, I guess that just makes me seem a little bit nuts, doesn't it?
It's kind of an attitude of, I'm not okay, but I'll be okay.
Yeah, and he doesn't really need anything else or anybody else. He's not looking for a new wife. He's not looking for, another family.
He's not even looking for companionship, really.
Not really.
Because he doesn't spend a lot of time talking to this woman. He just goes there because he's like, well, I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd check in, and we never see her the rest of the movie. Did they have this long friendship? No, not as far as the movie tells us.
Mm-hmm.
He does venture out a little bit. At the end of the movie, we do get a hint of what the end of his life is, where he finally gets on the train and goes to the city. And that's the moment where we think of the Shawshank Redemption, where he's looking at a TV and there's a guy going to outer space and he can't even comprehend that. He's asking
Yeah.
the woman, what's this guy doing?
Yeah, in Shawshank, Brooks says, I saw an automobile once when I was a little kid, but now they're everywhere. Where in this movie, he goes up to the window to see fucking John Glenn going into space for the first time. And he asks the woman next to him, well, what is that? Showing a picture of the Earth. She says, well, that's us. And again, his world is so small. The world barely exists outside of his cabin. And he really only ventures out in order to find work, but his environment doesn't really change. He is constantly surrounded by nature. He's constantly surrounded by other people who do the same job that he does. He's not really challenged by anything, but I don't think he really seeks that out.
It's kind of an innocence, but I think it's more just a simplicity. He could.
That's going back to what I said.
He
has a simple life, and that's all he wants.
He could expand his life. He could leave this place. He could join the modern world. I wanted to ask about this scene also. He goes to a theater, and they're having like a freak show. It's the Monkey Boy or whatever. And they show him in the audience, and he is crying.
Yeah.
What do you think that is supposed to be at that moment, where he is watching this crying?
I feel like he doesn't know how to react to it, because at no time in his life did he ever seek out entertainment. Entertainment for him is playing around with his kid
or looking at the stars.
Yeah. And I think in that moment, he is just marveling at the fact that anything is happening in front of him for his entertainment, for his pleasure, or his amazement, really. He is likely just amazed that this thing is happening at all.
And then in the next scene, he's looking at himself in the mirror.
Yeah.
A thing he hasn't done in a decade.
Yeah. Well, and kind of speaking of that, what did you think about the narrator? Because this movie is like half narrated here, narrated by Will Patton. And if you don't know the name, you know the guy, you know the actor. He was in a couple of really popular movies in the late 90s and early 2000s. Two of them in particular. He was in Armageddon as Chick, and he was in that Gone in 60 Seconds remake.
Even without seeing his face, the second he started talking, I knew exactly who was speaking.
Yeah.
I am well versed in the sound of his voice.
Exactly. But what did you think about there being a narrator here? Because this movie is adapted from a novel.
I liked the narration. I feel like for this kind of story, it does feel necessary because you're getting the inner thoughts of this guy who doesn't even really think of himself as having inner thought, I guess.
Yeah, it's also, this is his almost entire life. You get a little bit of his childhood up until he kind of gains consciousness of, oh, woman, I need to be with a woman, And then we get his entire life basically up until he dies when he's in his 80s.
And because this is a story about a guy who lives a small existence, and they say, we don't know where he came from, he has no heirs, he just died. Having a narrator allows you to tell the story that would otherwise never be told.
Right, and it also elevates his life to a point where it's worth narrating about. Because any other outsider looking at this guy's life would think, that's not notable. Why would you write a book about him? Why would you care?
Because sometimes the unremarkable can be remarkable, Trent.
That's kind of the whole point of the movie. So I know this is kind of a short episode, but I know there's some stuff here we need to talk about here outside of the main parts of the movie. I want to start off by talking about the aspect ratio of the camera, because this is not a huge widescreen normal kind of aspect ratio of this movie.
It's also not the other smaller size.
Yeah, it's not a 4:3. I don't know what the exact aspect ratio is, but the thing that I said to you was when him and his wife were on the ground and they're just kind of having pillow talk, I said it really focuses the eye because, yes, there is the beauty of the sunset in the background and the trees, and there's grass in the foreground, but it really focuses you on what the director wants you to look at. In this case, it's the couple. And later on, there's even that one shot that is one of the posters of the movie where Joel Edgerton is on the way, way bottom of the frame and he's standing on the train tracks and they go off into infinity. That shot, I think, is one of the best shots in the entire movie. But when you don't have the huge Vista widescreen kind of presentation here, yeah, it just focuses what you want to look at.
The one thing I knew about this movie was people talking about how it looked. And it is up for Best Cinematography at the Oscars. And by golly, I hope it wins because every scene in this movie is gorgeous. The aspect ratio is really interesting. You're right, it does focus the eye. But also just the framing of looking through the door. You open the door of his cabin and it snowed. Or it's flowers and grass and he and his wife go out into the sun.
Yeah.
It's all natural light. You get fire, you get smoke, you get winter, you get spring and darkness, and every element is featured in the movie. And there's also these shots where it's like they're recreating real historic photos from this time. So when the movie is starting and he's being transported on this train as he's a little boy, there's that shot of the giant fish hanging there. And there's just people sort of standing next to the fish. Why is that in the movie? It looks like a snapshot, like a literal picture that you would see. When he is out working in the forest, there's a tree that's almost cut down, but it's got a big chunk out of it.
Right.
And the tree is so big, there's a full-grown man laying in this cutout, and the saw is still in the tree, and there's two guys on either side of the saw.
Yeah, you've seen photos taken just like this where these old loggers were felling these 500-plus-year-old trees. We even get fucking William H. Macy. We haven't even said his name yet. We get him talking about, you know, guys, I've thought about this my entire life that I've been doing this job. You know, nature is all connected, and far be it from us to dictate what nature is supposed to be doing and what we're supposed to be doing to these really old trees. And we as humans are just children in the total timeline of the earth and shit like that.
And Carrie Condon says something similar, like, imagine being here when all of the ice caps were going around and forming this land. Isn't that fascinating? And then there's the young person who's like felling trees with them, and he's just like, we could cut down all the trees, and by the time we get done, there'll be more trees.
Right. We could go off and cut down trees for 1,000 years, and we would never run out of them. When in reality, dude, with the advent of technology, and that's the other thing I really wanted to talk about here, with the advent of the technological advances when it comes to cutting down trees and getting them out of there and shit like that, you as a human being rendered obsolete by the tools that people create in order to be more efficient. And the feelings that you have, I mean, especially now with jobs being replaced left and right when it comes to computers and AI and whatever it is, it's a hard feeling to really have because, man, I've been doing this now for I don't know how many seasons, and all of a sudden I'm out of work, I'm no longer useful. It's a hard thing to come to terms with.
There's a lot of themes they're bringing up in the movie. They're talking about technology. They're talking about nature. They're talking about how time just keeps moving forward. He says he worked on that bridge, and that's the project that haunts him forever. And then they built a stone bridge a few miles away years later, and now this one's obsolete.
More obsolescence. And it's not his fault. Like, of course, technology is going to continue to get better throughout the entirety of human history. It's just what happens. But you still feel it on a personal level. You and I know of people who worked on the railroad. My grandpa worked at the railroad, and your grandpa worked the railroad.
My great-grandpa,
Great-grandpa, yeah. And really, how many people does it take to maintain railroads these days because they're just not used as much? So I definitely felt the feelings that he was feeling here when it comes to just not being useful anymore when it comes to the job. And, you know, even if his family wasn't killed, he likely would have been feeling the same thing and feeling inadequate, or I can't provide for my family. But then, you know, the wife would have said, you know what? Forget about that. We can just do something else. We can have a farm. We can do this. We can do that.
Instead, he's alone wondering, what's it all about?
Yeah.
What's it all for? And at the end of the movie, he takes a $4 airplane ride, And he says something about, or the narrator says, when he kind of lost his senses for a minute, he did something crazy. He got up in that airplane and she flips him around. Suddenly he has this, again, realization. I get it. I get it. What is it that he gets? We don't really know. We just know that he knows.
I feel like in that moment he feels alive again because he loses control, not only of his own body. Like, I am entrusting the person who is flying this plane with my life. So I don't have control over what I'm doing anymore with my own body. And the thrill. When's the last time? Has he ever felt a thrill like this? I don't know if he ever has.
No, because he spent most of his younger years worried he was going to get killed by a tree. He says it's dangerous work. And, that big branch came out of nowhere and killed William H. Macy. And he's like, I couldn't help but feel like it was meant for me.
And, going back to him being haunted by not only the guy who was murdered, but the death of his family, at a certain point, you just have to move on. At a certain point, you have to either forgive yourself or forget about it or simply move on.
But he doesn't do any of that.
He doesn't do any of that.
We haven't even talked about the scene where he finds a girl in front of his cabin. He doesn't know how she got way out here. She's got a broken leg. He brings her inside, and the narrator says he knows it's not possible, but he couldn't help but be overwhelmed by the feeling his daughter had returned to him.
Right.
And then she disappears in the night, and he never sees her again. And he's not even sure it was real. He's not even convinced that really happened.
Yeah, because I know if you are out there by yourself, I'm sure that your mind plays tricks on you, especially because he says, oh, I can hear their voices. And we even hear it as audience members here. We hear the child laughing and talking and the wife laughing and talking.
And he doesn't want to look around because he's afraid to. He just knows he hears it, but looking for it will ruin it for him.
Yeah. And in that moment when he's talking to Carrie, he says, if I do look backwards and I see them, I might, scare him away, which goes back to the blame. He blames himself for everything that happens, really. But, wow. Yeah, I like this one, Betsy. I was a little apprehensive because, it's supposed to be this artsy movie and it's going to be really beautiful, and it is, but I didn't expect it to go so deep. And I also didn't anticipate talking about Shawshank this episode. So, hey, I'm glad about that. But anything else you wanted to mention, Betsy?
Not really significant to the plot in any way. I do find it curious that at the beginning of this film, there was a two-headed cow. And somewhere in the last movie we watched, The Secret Agent, there was a two-faced cat. It was a weird thing to have happen 2 weeks in a row.
I don't know. There's always a through line in some of these episodes that we're doing. I wanted to mention the other Oscars that this has been nominated for. You already said cinematography. It also got original song. There is a song that is being played over the credits here that was, I think, written and sung by Nick Cave. Obviously, motion picture of the year and adapted screenplay. Even though there's not a whole lot of dialogue here, I think it's really the narration and how it is written. There's some words in here that I appreciated. There's some like $5 words here that I'm very impressed by. I didn't write any of them down, but I was happy to hear them.
Everything William H. Macy says is very eloquent.
Yes.
In a way that is unexpected.
Yeah. But all right, I'm going to call this an episode then. This has been Train Dreams. If you guys would like to tell us what you thought about Train Dreams, please send us an email. The email address is neverseenitpod@gmail.com. I'm actually going to read something that we got submitted to us on YouTube. The person on YouTube tried to email us, but the email bounced back, I guess. You got to make sure that you're typing it right, guys. neverseenitpod@gmail.com. But this YouTube person sent in a comment about The Secret Agent, our episode from last week. His moniker on YouTube is Dr. David 1963. He says, tried to email you, but it bounced back, so I'm posting it here. Love the podcast. I did enjoy this film, and Wagner Moura is terrific, but I was frustrated that the film appeared to take on too much. It felt like a mini-series in one film. Yeah, that happens with long movies like that, where you definitely want to show and tell everything that you have in your mind, but sometimes you need an editor.
You gotta cut something, but then sometimes cutting it means you cut too much.
Yeah. Like, what is important, what isn't important? Well, everything's important, but is it? Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. He says it wanted to remember the spirit of the 70s in Brazil, celebrate the resilience of the people, whilst also acknowledging the corrupt ones portrayed with a mixture of horror and comedy. Yeah. Also, it wanted to tell the story of one man and what happened to him in the midst of all this chaos. I do think that the second half of the film is mostly brilliant, but it's a shame that when Armando's informant tells him Elsa is now the most important figure in this story, 1 hour and 12 minutes had already gone by. I think Fernando's admission, this is in the future, of course, I think Fernando's admission that he doesn't remember his father is key to understanding the film. It is a powerful and tragic statement in the circumstances, but it encapsulates what the film is about. The difficulty of retaining personal and collective memory in the midst of trauma, as Betsy points out, when you're not allowed to share it in the first place because you couldn't talk to each other at the time or had aliases, etc.
Yeah, it was a complicated time in Brazilian history. So if you haven't listened to the episode, basically what I said was, it feels like we're being told something now that they couldn't talk about 50 years ago.
Yeah. And if they did, they only could talk about it in silence.
In
It
code.
could not be public.
Yeah.
Anyway, he finishes up by saying, still, it's one of the best films of the year for me, top 10. He says it's not perfect, but a unique take on a complex subject, albeit addressed to the Brazilian audience. Yeah, that's what I said. And the last little comment here is, I thought last year's I'm Still Here was a more effective approach on a similar subject. Yeah, that movie is kind of all about the real people, this because it was based on a real story, the real people fighting against the corruption and them being survivors amongst them.
And because it's based on a true story, it has a finite point of view. It's telling very specific things, where The
Yes.
Secret Agent is telling a broader story.
Yeah. And really, The Secret Agent is not about the resistance. It is about the innocent people that get caught up in the corruption. So thank you very much, Dr. David 1963, for sending in that comment. Next time, use the right email, neverseenitpod@gmail.com.
As far as I know, it shouldn't be bouncing, so I don't know what else it could be.
I have no idea. Maybe we got banned somehow. But anyway, thanks again for the comment. If you too would like to send us comments on YouTube or TikTok or any of the other social media platforms, please do so, because sometimes email is hard. All right, that is going to be the end of this episode. Betsy, we only got one left. What are we going to be covering?
I mentioned it earlier. You could figure it out. We have one more Best Picture nominee to watch, and it is going to be F1.
F1, the movie. You can't forget the tagline there. It's kind of like what they did with F9, the Fast and Furious movie. They added the Fast Saga tagline on the end of that one because people like us, or who are jerks about it, we just kept calling it F9.
Well, I'm excited for F1.
Yeah,
and I
so-
don't know why it's a prequel to the Fast and Furious saga, but whatever. I guess we'll find out in a
I'm there
week.
for it. I guess I guess Brad Pitt is going to be a part of the family. But anyway, I forgot to mention before we get out of here, we also have a Patreon. Go to patreon.com/neverseenitpod. If you're not into all of these Oscar movies that we're talking about, I'm sorry, but we have to do it. We've been doing it now for 5 years.
6, Trent. 6
Yeah,
years.
excuse me. This is our 6th season of the Oscars. Go over to Patreon, sign up today. We got 5 other shows that we put out every single month.
You don't have to wait until next Sunday for our next episode.
Even if you are excited for F1, I'm not. So until then, my name is Trent.
My name is Betsy.
We'll catch you next week for fun.
Fun! Goodbye!